I was trying to think of a previous presidency where we'd seen something like this. But if you go back to 1968, when Richard Nixon was running for office, LBJ didn't do anything to harm Nixon. He did everything in his power to be as honest and forthright with Nixon as he could be, admitting that he was essentially unsure what to do next. And so this is really something radically new. The last time a president left office with an unmitigated disaster in the Oval Office behind him was Buchanan. And of course, he bequeathed to Abraham Lincoln the Civil War. You got to go back that far. But Buchanan was not mendacious. This is pure mendacity. This is malevolence. This is a deliberate attempt to subvert the election. We're unhappy. You're going to come in here and you think you're going to make peace. Well, we're going to fix you. To some extent, I've looked at this. It doesn't fit the definition of treason per se, but I think it's pretty damn close.
I mean, overnight, Polymarket, which accurately predicted the presidential election, and then the feds raided the CEO of Polymarket's home because he nailed it, showed that Trump was going to win. So this morning, we have Polymarket numbers showing that the use of a nuclear weapon in the year 2024 is likely. I mean, people are betting that, yes, we're going to see the use of a nuclear weapon in 2024. It's risen overnight thanks to this latest long-range attack. I mean, what are they playing at? I mean, it's like fun for these. It's like fun for these people.
Well, you're right. This is not a game. This is very serious stuff. And President Putin earlier today signed a new description of the use of nuclear weapons in Russian strategy. In other words, he's changed the approach, saying that effectively, if we're attacked in overwhelming numbers by conventional forces across our border, whether these are manned or unmanned systems like the ATACMS missiles or cruise missiles, we reserve the right to use essentially a nuclear weapon to strike the territory from which the attack was launched. Now, this was not an overwhelming attack. What Zelensky did was launch 6 ATACMS missiles, 5 of which the Russians successfully intercepted and shot down. The 6th struck near a location in Russia called Karachev, where there is a stockpile of weapons, but it didn't hit the stockpile. It simply started a small fire, which was quickly put out. Now, Vladimir Putin and the Russian state want to put an end to this war. There's no question about it. They would like it to end. And they know that President Trump is certainly willing to try and end it. So this gives them an incentive to exercise more restraint until he arrives. But the bad news is that I think this attack is probably going to trigger the use of weapons to destroy, frankly, what remains of Ukraine. We know that over the weekend, they already struck the power grid in western Ukraine, which means that the people in the west, as well as the east, in the areas controlled by the Ukrainian government right now, are all going to freeze through the winter, which is a disaster. Of course, they just said they were going to cut off natural gas to Austria as well. The bottom line is this could trigger the thing that everybody says they don't want to happen, which is a major advance by Russian forces, which are already advancing as we speak here very, very rapidly, all the way to the Dnieper River. Because if you're in the Russian General Staff and you look at the map, you know that President Trump doesn't come into office until 21 January, and you have this maniac in Kiev who seems to be determined with his friends in Washington to start a war that could lead to nuclear exchange. Then you say, Mr. President, we strongly recommend we seize the river line, go all the way to the river and be done with it, and then potentially, if necessary, go into Kiev itself and eliminate this government. I think those things are now on the table, and this might well trigger it.
A total flattening of Ukraine.
Yes.
I mean, and people in Washington are playing this game right now, all in an effort to seemingly undermine President Trump. What will... I just can't wrap my head around the disconnect from these insane people. So they're trying to undermine President Trump. They're funneling additional billions of dollars of weapons into Ukraine at any possible last minute. Antony Blinken mentioning that the other day. They're going to do that right up until Trump takes office. We're going to funnel as much money as we can into that. But at the heart of it, Europeans are going to be killed. Americans could be killed. And I don't think they have any remorse about it. What do you think the response is going to be to European countries and to the United States?
Well, you bring up a very critical point. What happens now in Eastern Europe, specifically in Eastern Ukraine, does not stay there. This has an impact on Russia's view of its relations with us everywhere. Now, you've heard these reports about North Korean troops supposedly in Eastern Ukraine. It's a total lie. There's no evidence to support that. The people using satellites, watching carefully, see no one on the ground that resembles anybody from North Korea. The only North Korean troops in Russia are in eastern Siberia. They are not west of the Urals, so there's none of that. This is being used as another excuse for escalating the war to the level that we are now, where we're using Army tactical missile systems with a 200-mile range. Now, this is going to lead to more trouble, but the trouble that we're going to see is what you're describing. If we find that any of these weapons are being launched from Germany or France or Great Britain, if we find that these weapons are coming from Germany, Great Britain, France, I think those countries could be in for an attack. They could actually, for the first time, see their countries at war, seriously at war with Russia. Remember, Vladimir Putin always said, if you persist in this and you attack the Russian homeland, you will be at war with Russia. Now, that's a very dangerous condition to be in right now because we can't stop anything. As I and others on your program have said in the past, we don't have the air and missile defense capability to stop these missiles. And that's not just hypersonic. We can only defend about 5 to 7% of NATO territory. And yet we're provoking the one state in the world today which has the capacity to fire thousands and thousands and thousands of missiles that could reach our homelands. They could obviously attack us as well. I don't think that's going to happen because that's not something that Vladimir Putin wants to do. And he does know that essentially Trump wants to end the war. So he's going to exercise restraint. But the people who are going to pay the most price right now are the Ukrainians. They're simply going to be annihilated.
And overnight, Finland is warning its residents to be ready for war, saying the situation is serious. And so here we go. You just wrote a new piece called Trump and the Storm of the Century, and really as it relates to the Middle East. But as you mentioned, what happens in Ukraine is not isolated to Ukraine. It has implications in the Middle East and what Trump does against Iran as well. I mean, can you unpack this for us?
Well, the thing is that right now we're making it clear to Russia that we see Russia as a permanent, unchanging enemy. In other words, there's no room for negotiation, no room for coexistence as far as Washington is concerned. Well, Russia has vital strategic interests in the Middle East. They are going to stand by Iran. President Putin has said this publicly. He said it's a priority for the Russian people to protect Iran. And he's also made it very clear to the Israelis not to attack his forces that are on the ground in Syria. Now, at the same time, you've got Russian foreign minister and Russian military leaders traveling all over the region. They have a huge presence in Iran, but that's not the only location where they are right now. They've effectively covered the whole region. And if anything, we're seeing an alliance of all the states in the region today, including Turkey, against Israel. Remember, the Turks have broken relations with Israel, which is something that, for whatever reason, nobody in Washington expected. And the Turks have made it very clear that they will turn on the Kurds, whom we are pushing to war with Turkey, in the hope that that will divert the Turks from taking any action against Israel. Well, that's absurd. They can go through the Kurds in a matter of weeks and annihilate everything in northern Iraq that threatens them, and they still have hundreds of thousands of troops left over that they can pour into Lebanon. And remember, they've got millions of refugees on their soil now. They've got another 1.5 million refugees coming out of Lebanon because the Israelis are now trying to do to Lebanon what they've done in Gaza. And there's every reason to expect the Israelis to do in Palestine, that is the West Bank, what they've done in Gaza. The Egyptians have now formally met with the Turks, the Egyptian military. they will cooperate. And Jordan is close to exploding. There are 11.2 million Palestinian Arabs living in Jordan who formerly lived in Israel. They are on the verge of exploding. So the entire region is a powder keg. And what we're doing in Russia signals to Russia that they have no incentive whatsoever to cooperate with us in the Middle East to prevent a wider regional war. On the contrary, they're now positioned to do enormous damage to us and Israel in the Middle East, just as they are positioned to do that in Eastern Europe. And again, and we've been over this before, Clayton, we are not in the position to wage a major regional war against anyone. Yeah, I don't know how many ATACMs we have left, but I doubt very seriously that there are many there. And if the French are dumb enough to provide cruise missiles to these people, then the French could be on the receiving end, as I pointed out earlier. And the Germans, who thus far have said they're not going to send anything more to Ukraine, have now suddenly said they're going to provide some kind of unmanned system support. These people are begging to be destroyed. Russia is not bluffing. The Russians are not buffaloing anybody. And people in Washington still don't get it. I don't know why, but they don't.
They're playing an incredibly dangerous game, and it seems like the Biden administration is purposefully trying to sink a Trump presidency, hand him a massive regional war or world war, to, as you mentioned, to buffalo his presidency. You've served under President Trump. As you've seen his cabinet come together and these pieces, obviously he doesn't take office for another 60 days. What do you think Trump's biggest blind spot is right now, heading into both a powder keg in the Middle East and Russia?
Under normal conditions, President Trump is someone who understands that war destroys presidencies. All he has to do is reflect on the 20th century. Everyone who inevitably went into war in some fashion or another came out of it destroyed and wounded. He doesn't want to end up like Lyndon Johnson. He doesn't want to end up like, frankly, W., who was at the beginning of the century, whose reputation is now permanently in the trash. I think he understands that. But on the other hand, the most important feature of his appointments is the unconditional support that all of these people have promised to Israel. That's where he will not give ground. And I don't think he may understand, but he may, who knows, that what's happening right now to the Russians in Eastern Europe is going to have an impact in the Middle East. And what we do has global implications. The message that Putin has tried to send routinely is that we can escalate horizontally. We can make life miserable for you in Africa. We can make life miserable for you in the Middle East. We can make life miserable for you in Asia. So why are you doing this? Why are the Russians back in force in Cuba? Why are there submarines now all over the Atlantic, and some of which are also in the Pacific, as well as in the Med and the Red Sea? In other words, they're prepared. They're prepared for a fight, even if that includes us, which is something that President Putin has striven to avoid, but they're prepared for it. The question that I keep asking is, are we? And as far as I can tell, in the Navy, the Air Force, it doesn't matter anywhere, we're not. And if you're not ready, why provoke? It's dangerous. It's ill-considered. You don't start a fight unless you think you've got a pretty damn good chance of winning it. People are living in fantasy world right now. In addition to Washington being Epstein Island plus, it's also Fantasy Island. They live in a world there where they think they are the masters of the universe. You know, there's nothing we can't do. We're the superpower. That's over. It's been over for 20 years. That's the message of BRICS. That's the message that the Russians, the Chinese, not just them, the Indians, the Brazilians, everyone is sending that message to us. Behave like a normal nation. Go back to behaving the way we used to behave, which is we wanted to do business with everybody. We didn't want to bomb them. So we got to get out of the bomb and get back into business. And we'll find that we can be very successful and our economy will recover. But the path we're on right now is confrontation. And I think that President Trump on one side from Biden, but yet on the other side because of this obsession with Israel. And Israel is not defending itself. Israel's engaged in a major offensive war across the region against all of its enemies and expects us to destroy them for them. This is a catastrophe, in my judgment, strategically for us. And I think it's a catastrophe for everybody else. Nothing good is going to come out of this. Nothing good is going to come out of this for Israel.
What do you guys think about the long-range missile decision? Do you think this can possibly spark World War III? Please leave your comment below. We would love to hear from you.
Thank you for making it this far. If you like this video, you might want to share it with a like-minded friend. Thank you, and as always, stay blessed.